Assalamualaikum and hello everyone. We are from Group 5, Section 2, Principle of Macroeconomic Courses from Semester 2, 2020-2021. Our topic assigned is Analysis of Inflation and Cost of Living. In this video, we will discuss in depth about the related topic. Inflation can be defined as general rise in prices of goods and services in a country during a period of time where it reflects the decline in purchasing power of a given currency. The purchasing power here means the amount of goods and services that can be purchased with a unit of currency. The measurement can be made by looking at the average price change in a basket of the goods and services. While cost of living can be defined as cost of maintaining certain standard of living, the cost is the amount of money needed to cover basic expenses based on the place and time period. It can be said that cost of living is connected to the wages of an individual. The most well-known indicator of inflation is known as Consumer Price Index (CPI), which measures the percentage of change in prices of a basket of goods and services consumed by household. There is 12 major groups of consumer price index, which includes transportation, housing, food and non-alcoholic beverages, miscellaneous goods and services, and others. This is the example of percentage change of consumer price index in Malaysia between March 2021 and February 2021, where we can see there is up and down trends. Next is the comparison of inflation rate between three countries, which is Malaysia, Indonesia, and Brunei. Indonesia has the highest rate of inflation during 2015, which was at 6.36%, and Brunei has the lowest rate of inflation, which was at negative 0.48%. In 2016, the inflation rate of Indonesia was dropped significantly to 3.52%. This is due to the government intervention in price control, which was reported by the Central Statistics Agency (BPS). On the other hand, Malaysia managed to stabilize the inflation rate during 2015 and 2016, which was roughly at 2%. However, there's a sudden increase during 2017 and a sudden drop in 2018. The increase during 2017 was due to the transport indices, while the decrease of inflation rate in 2018 due to the abolishment of Goods and Services Tax (GST). In Brunei, the inflation rate rise from negative 1.26% in 2017 to 1.02% in 2018 and dropped to negative 0.39% in 2019. It has been reported that Brunei's economic recovery expected to continue compared to Malaysia and Indonesia.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Safa Binti Mazir. My machine number is 2013922. And now I shall talk about the comparative inflation trend among countries. Countries, or also known as C. The country with the highest inflation rate is Vietnam. Vietnam was recorded with the highest inflation rate in 2020 out of all C countries at 3.2% inflation. However, they are showing growth in their economy, which has led to the slowest inflation. As for the country with the lowest inflation rate, Malaysia is the country with the lowest GDP in all of Southeast Asia, with a negative 1.1 inflation rate. High inflation rate can lead to high interest rate, which in this case Malaysia is the highest in Asia, which is not good for the COVID-19 recovery. Continuing with Southeast Asian countries, Brunei has an inflation rate of 1.9% in 2020 and estimated to rise up to 1% in 2021 and 2022. And the inflation rate in Indonesia is 2% in 2020, which is expected to rise in 2022 up to 33.2%. As for the worldwide countries, Venezuela has the inflation rate of 6,500%, which is the highest in the whole world, and also known as hyperinflation. And as for the lowest GDP inflation in the whole world, Qatar has won that title with negative 2.17% inflation rate.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Danisha Syafa Kamila. My metric number is 2022424. In this section, I will be presenting about hyperinflation. What is hyperinflation? Hyperinflation is description of quick, over and out price rises in the economic general, when the prices of goods and services rise more than 50% per month. There are two cases of hyperinflation which we will discuss. First, in Zimbabwe 2008. The most recent example of hyperinflation, Zimbabwe's currency whose hit a peak in November 2008. Even the recent value in Zimbabwe banknotes is fantastic. This is due to the acute economic crisis. Up to the highest money was $100 million. In March 2008, the prices of sausage in Zimbabwe rocketed to 30 million SYD. Starting from President Robert Mugabe, suddenly removal of an entrenched and experienced farmer class severely damaged the country's capacity for food production, which dropped supply well below demand and so rises price.
The US and EU first imposed sanctions during the rule of Robert Mugabe for alleged human rights abuses and electoral fraud. They say there's no broader impact on the economy as the sanctions are directed at individuals and companies.
Until any amount of money there is worthless. Zimbabwe entered hyperinflation in the early 21st century, and they produced 21 billion SYD in 2006 in order to pay off IMF debt. Second, in Germany 1923. In its last year of existence, hyperinflation was one of the main difficulties affecting the Weimar Republic of Germany. In October 1923, the monthly inflation was at 29,500%. During the World War I, Germany lost the battle and had to pay to the winner. The government's money was so worthless. A whole wheelbarrow of it couldn't buy a loaf of bread. Germany was compelled to pay back the victors' large war debt after the loss of World War I. But because the value of the fiat currency was already severely fallen by extensive borrowing to cover the war expenditure, Germany was banned for using its papermark money for reparations. Weimar Germany had to sell significant sums of the mark to foreign currencies with which it was eligible for payment in order to settle its obligation. The German government started to sell marks for cash, which finally resulted in hyperinflation at any price.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Halisa Ridwan, and today I will be discussing about the main causes of inflation. The main causes of inflation, it can be divided into two, which is demand pull inflation and cost pull inflation. So first is demand pull inflations. When the demand of the consumer is high and the prices of the goods and services will go up. So what happened in here is when there is a lot of demand of goods and services and the supply is low, and because of that, it pulls the price to go up. So based on the graph below, it occurs when the aggregate demand is more than supply. So it means it has high demand, however, the supply is low. So the aggregate demand is shift to the right and reach new equilibrium. And the new equilibrium level is going to have a higher prices level. And this is what it means with inflations or demand pull inflations. So, for example, if aggregate demand is increasing by 5%, however, the productive capacity is only increased below the aggregate demand, such as 3%. So, the response of the firm, obviously, they will increase the prices because they'll see the demand of exceeding the supply, and the firm is literally cannot make the good as fast as possible. Demand pull inflations often say it as too much money spent chasing too few goods. It's often say like that is because the cause of the inflation is due to the money that is spent in goods and services. The second one is cost push inflation. The increases of the price due to increases in the cost production and raw materials, or we can say input. Choose a quantity of demand of goods services will fall. So based on the graph below, it occurs when the aggregate supply of goods and services is decreasing, which is shift to the left, and due to increasing in the number of costs of input, which is the raw materials and so on, and causing the price level to go up. It means higher cost of production can decrease the aggregate supply, and the demand for the goods and services has not changed, so the price that is increasing due to increasing level of cost of production is going to pass into the consumer, and it is creating cost push inflations. So for example, in case of organizations of the petroleum exporting countries, due to geopolitical event, this organization is banned oil export to some countries. Because of that, it will follow by some shocks and increase of the price of oil from $3 to $12. Inflations occur due to there is no increase in demand, and the impact is lead to increasing in price as well as higher production costs for those firms use petroleum products. Are the causes of demand pull inflations. First is growing economy. When there is a growing economy, consumers feel confident. It will increase the demand because they will spend more and take more on debt. On the other hand, it can be because of the people are getting richer, so they can spend more money. And those people who are getting rich are due to credit or borrow money from the bank. Note that inflation will reduce the saving, just the demand for the goods and services will increase. Second, monetary expense. The bank central will increase the supply of the economy, which is the expansions of the money supply. With more money, people will tend to buy more and increase the demand, and with the few goods to buy, it makes the price to go up. Next is product marketing. Marketing may lead to strong demand for a certain product. For example, high branded products such as Apple, a technology product. This allows Apple to reach higher price compared to another competitors. Because of that, a lot of people will spend their money to buy the products. Next is fiscal policy. It involves the government effort to encourage economic growth through the fiscal policy, which is to change the tax by reducing it. When the tax is reduced, people tend to spend more, so demand will increase. And the next is the causes of cost push inflations. First is higher taxes. When the government increase in taxes, it will push up the price of the product or services, and because of higher taxes can reduce the price of the product. However, the price will be a temporary increase, and oftentimes the firm will pass the burden of the tax into the customer. For example, like tax on alcohol, cigarette, and also diesel. Second is exchange rate. When the currency is weak or the exchange rate is low compared to the other countries, this can cause cost push inflation. The imports will be expensive or rise in the prices. Choose the firm will pay more in their input. Next is the increase in wages. If the wages of the workers in the company are high, the prices will be increased because wages are considered a large percentage of cost in the firms. However, there are also some influences such as labor unions, because these non-profit organizations can influence labor rights to increase their wages. Therefore, the price will be increasing due to increase in the wages of workers. For example, recruiting specific talent of workers. Next and last is natural disaster. Natural disaster might disrupt the supply chains, and because of that, the supply is decreasing or limiting the supply and causing inflation. For example, the firms will not get the supply due to natural disaster. On the other hand, increasing of the cost of production due to droughts and flood, this also because of the scarcity of the supply. Just like what I explained earlier about the causes of inflations, inflations do occur around the country, such as in Malaysia. First is increasing in taxes. Increasing in GST causing inflation in Malaysia. When the tax is increased, the demand is decreasing. Note that Malaysia is highly dependable on domestic consumption. Secondly is exchange rate. Inflation due to exchange rate, it brings negative side for Malaysia. This because exchange rate is related to the imports and it affects the imported price. Lastly, Malaysia also facing increasing in money supply. Due to increasing in money supply, a lot of people spend their money and pressure of price from supply side. While in Indonesia, the causes of inflation is first natural disaster. The earthquake that occurred in Mamuju, West Sulawesi in 2020 made Mamuju region record as highest inflation rate in Indonesia. This because rising commodity prices such as fish and chilies. Second, the price change of oil. This condition occurred due to adjustment of the oil price and become the crucial factor of the cost push inflations. As we know, oil is linked to the economy. When the price of oil is increasing, it has an impact on rising prices of basic commodities due to high production costs. Lastly, is decreasing in tax. From 1980, the government cut the tax and interest rate to 30%. Because of that, a lot of people spend their money into goods and services and causing inflations. Last but not least is Brunei. The cost inflation of Brunei is commonly due to the rising prices of goods and services. Due to pandemic COVID-19, the prices of material is increased, such as food supplies, household equipment. And indeed, this is burdening most of people. Thus, the demand are not constantly increasing. And second is excessive use of credit. When there's excessive use of credit, people will tend to spend their money to buy goods and services. However, this is not very healthy because practically they won't prefer to saving their money. And last but not least is disruption of supply chain. The absence of supply chain causes inflation to rise. This due to when the demand is high but the goods are not available, and it will cause an inflation, especially during this pandemic.
Okay, Assalamualaikum everyone. I'm Faiza Omar Khalifa. Now I will presenting about the impact of hyperinflation on people. Next. Okay, so nowadays the occurrence of hyperinflation can be said to be very rare in a region or a country, accompanied by increasingly sophisticated technological development. We all agree that hyperinflation is very rare in a country, but when it does, it will have a huge impact on that country. It affects many sectors, such as finance, currency, export-import activities, and many more. And countries that have experienced hyperinflation, including Germany, Venezuela, Zimbabwe, United States, and so on. Hyperinflation will have a negative effect on the value of a country's currency. Those who experience this dire condition will experience a decline in the value of their country's currency from its true value, and that is what will spread downward and cause new impacts. Actually, there are a lot of impacts caused by the hyperinflation, and this time I will not explain them one by one, but I will discuss them in a general way. Next. So the first one is purchasing power has fallen sharply. One of the causes is the currency deficit. A currency deficit can cause people's purchasing power to drop dramatically, especially for those who have already saved their money. Because when money becomes worthless, so does people's saving. For example, if you had saved 500 marks before the hyperinflation, this number did not increase as it did before for the did not increase as it did for the price, but the value of the savings remains at the mark at the 500 mark. And for another example, if the currency is in deficit, the price of goods will soar high while public demand is very low due to this. It can be said that the majority of people are unable to afford the things they need, such as food, clothing, and other daily necessities. And like in Zimbabwe, the country also experienced a budget deficit during the period 1990 to 1997, even continuing until 2004. The country's budget deficit increased to 20% of the country's total GDP. Next one is scarcity of goods. Price increase continuously and cause the raw materials of a product to be very expensive so that people find it difficult to buy them. For example, the raw materials for making clothes is fabric. And in this case, the fabric becomes very expensive so that production makes in making clothes decrease or even greatly decrease because the raw material has such a high price. So that the clothes producers who are already short of funds are unable to buy their raw materials and also result in a small number of clothes being produced. And in order not to pay more tomorrow, people started to hoarding. The hoard creates deficiency, starting with durable items like cars and washing machines. If hyperinflation still continues, people will stockpile on perishable items or items they use on a daily basis, such as bread, rice, milk, and clothes, and so on. And these daily supplies became scarce, causing the economy to collapse. And like in Zimbabwe in 2007, the inflation rate experienced by Zimbabwe became even more severe, even reaching the point of 115%. As a result, all food supplies became scarce. The supply of fuel for production and consumption was drastically reduced, and there were no health equipment and facilities for the people. And the last one is daily hardship and significant increase in the number of poor people due to the currency deficit and the even increasing selling price. Daily life became difficult for many people. Hyperinflation created a situation whereby price rose almost hour by hour. People were paid twice in a day and often had to take piles of money to the shops in wheelbarrows, like in Germany. Shopping also stopped becoming about paying for goods with money, but developed into an exchange economy whereby goods were swapped for each other. For example, food for toiletries. And this problem, I think this problem is perhaps one of the biggest among the others, because the increasing number of poor people in a country greatly affects the country itself from all sectors. This is related, and also this problem is related to the impact that I have explained before. Due to the currency deficit, people save for nothing. The price of goods is getting more expensive, and even goods can be said to be scarce, making it difficult for people to get their daily needs and even cannot afford to buy them. And if there is hyperinflation, people who were able before can be fall into poverty. How was the condition of the people who were already poor before? Therefore, this hyperinflation is very dangerous and can turn the country into an all-out crisis and can make people into a trouble and fall into poverty. And that's all from my part. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Stop.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Abdul Fattah Ismail and my matric number is 18 23 87 5.
Next, I'm going to present inflation against growth of income. First of all, we have to ask this question, which is how economic growth can lead to inflation. So we have 2 points. The first point, we can say that people begin to anticipate inflation as a result of increased economic growth, and this anticipation of increasing prices may become personality. The second point is fast economic growth continue to push prices and incomes higher. This is why the inflation is high. So if we push prices and income to higher price, directly the inflation will be high.
Move on to the next point, which is low growth and higher inflation. Yeah, there is a possibility for an economy to see low growth while still seeing higher inflation. As we can see in this graph, our vertical line, which named PL, it means price level, and the horizontal line, this one, named real GDP, Y. Y, it means gross domestic product. And we have this line named ID. ID means aggregate demand. And this line named SRIS, which means short run aggregate supply. Yeah, we can see that this one, the Y1, decrease because it's coming back to zero. We start from here. This is zero, so it's coming back to zero. So while this one, the short run increase, it's going up, as you can see. So we start from Y1 to Y2, and here we start from P1 to P2. This one we can see that it's increased, and this one is coming back to zero, so it's decreased. Because we start from 0, 1, and so on. So this one is coming back, it's decreased, and this one is coming up, so it's increased. So that's why we say we can see that this one, the low growth decrease, low, it's low, and this one is higher because it's increased. Yeah, that's why we say that if there is a cost push inflation, this will happen. Increasing oil prices can trigger cost push inflation. It raises a business price and lowers disposable profit. As a result, there is a least demand and higher inflation. Stagflation. Stagflation, this is a term we use it to describe this situation. Yeah, let's continue. As we can say, this is kind of an example. We can say that the rate of economic growth in United Kingdom fall in 2011, and inflation was comparatively high. So these three things that you can see here, these three factors contribute to the inflation. So as you can see that food and oil prices are increasing. So the second one is depreciation of the pound, resulting in high import costs. So the last one, taxes are increasing. So these three factors caused the inflation in 2011 in UK. So as a result, despite the low rate of expansion, inflation was high. So we can conclude this part there is a possibility that economic prosperity and inflation will collide. So inflation is expected to increase during time of fast economic growth. Low inflation and successful economic development are also feasible as long as the growth is sustained and productive potential grows at a comparative pace to aggregate demand. So this is all from me. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa
To
barakatuh.
wrap this discussion, inflation has its both advantages and disadvantages. Moderate inflation enable economic growth and allow adjustment of wages and prices of goods and services. While the disadvantages of inflation is the high inflation tends to discourage investment due to the uncertainty and confusion during the period. Inflation also can make uncompetitive economy and the value of saving would be reduced. The connection between inflation and cost of living is inflation can affect the cost of living by reducing the purchasing power of income, at the same time increase the daily expenses of an individual.
Thank you for watching our video. Thank you, and that's all.